Okay, so if you're not familiar with Mediahuis, it is a multiple media company. It's in Belgium, the Netherlands, also in Ireland and Luxembourg. And we have Paul Verwilt, who is the COO of Mediahuis here today. And our own Dustin Tetley, who's a director with MATHER Economics, is actually going to introduce and interview Paul at the conclusion of his presentation. So at this point, gentlemen, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have the pleasure of introducing Paul Verwilt, CEO of Mediahuis Group. We at Mather have worked very closely with Mediahuis and Paul for a long time now. And more recently, we've moved into an official partnership with Mediahuis. And since then, we've had an opportunity to work even more closely with Paul and his team, and they've been very thoughtful and thorough partners of ours. So we're thrilled to have them here today. And Paul will be speaking about how Mediahuis' subscription engine drives pricing, retention, acquisition, and engagement success. So without further ado, please welcome Paul Verwilt. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for having me here. What I'll try to do in my 20 minutes and to make sure we have enough time to chat about some questions that you might have. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Mediahuis. It's for kind of a special company. You'll see that. Talk to you about our strategy, but I'll try to focus as much time as I can on what I've called the subscription engine, which is basically what has driven the growth in subscriptions that we've seen over the last 6 to 7 years. But Mediahuis first, as Nick already said, we're a medium-sized European media company. We're active in 4 countries. Our sort of headquarters is in Belgium. This is also where it all started. We have revenues of around 1 billion euros, and we have around 4,500 people, colleagues working for the group. As you can see, we have multiple locations in the different countries. We have both national quality titles, regional titles, also very popular titles. And we're also into the business of digital marketplaces and media ventures as well. What you can see here is we like to call ourselves a company, a young company with deep roots. I'll come to the young in the next slide, but the deep roots, you can see them here. And to the left, you can see what we call the Haarlemse Courant, which is a newspaper that was first published in 1656. That is still being published still as a printed version, but also obviously with just digital platforms. And it's the oldest still existing newspaper which has a print publication in the world, and we're very proud of that. Others might not agree with our standard point of view, but again, we're a newspaper company, so we must be right, I guess. To the right, it's also an important newspaper for us. It's called The Standard. It's the #1 quality newspaper in Belgium. And why is that so important? It was this newspaper that the father of our current chairman saved from bankruptcy. And that was in the late 1970s. And so went quite bad, and he came out of other business, but saw the value of the brand and the journalism of that brand. And together with a number of other colleague industrial players, he saved the newspaper, and he built it into what it currently is. Now, I said a young company. We were created in 2013, so that is quite young for a European media company. Basically, Mediahuis was created out of 2 other publishing companies called Corelio and Concentra, the #2 and #3 publishing houses in Belgium. And how that happened is it made an interesting story. Is that when we sat together, I was part of one of of Concentra, one of the founders of Mediahuis. I was the chief operating officer as well at the company. When we looked forward and we made our long-term plans, what we saw is that we were still doing okay, but not good enough. And there was a real fear that the business models would not be able to support our journalism anymore, and that we would have to start cutting products, start cutting jobs in journalism. That's something we really didn't want to do. So we made a number of plans, and one of the plans led to a merger with the #2 player in Belgium, Corelio, and we started discussions in April 2013, and in the end of June we had a term sheet that we had agreed on. So it went quite quickly. And what we saw in those first years, 2013, 2014, is that we saw that the merge really worked because of the additional creation of scale. We were able to crank up our profitability quite substantially. And that also allowed us to, let's say, start a quite strong M&A activity in Europe. And you can see here we've called it 1.0, 2.0, and now we're up to 6.0 with 2 acquisitions that we did last year in Luxembourg and in Holland. And this has been a strategy which was a very explicit strategy. We feel that the industry needs scale. We made huge investments, and we invest around 70 million a year in technology, which is quite a lot for what we do. And we can only do that once we have that scale. So we really believe that scale is important. And we'll also be looking to add like 7.0 and 8.0 and so on in the coming years as well, and try to keep growing in that. So that's quite important for us. We won't look at this too long, but that also translated into growing revenue. And we started in 2014 with a little bit less than 300 million. Now we're up to almost that billion euros. Profitability has been quite good. This is the operational result that you see on the right-hand side. This would translate into EBITDAs in 2020 of around 180 million euros, which we're quite happy with. We try to focus on an EBITDA percentage of 15, but last year was, let's say, a little bit better than we had hoped for, also because of obviously the reasons that we all know. So right, that's the introduction of who we are. This is really important. This is also what Tony talked about. We talked about McClatchy. This is what we do. We are a company of journalism. We believe in this independent journalism, and we believe that the media, the brands that we make, that they make a difference and that they contribute to every person and also the society. And we believe we have a very important role to play. And I think what we've seen over the last couple of years is that journalism has even become more important with all of the things that are happening in the world. But we have seen, obviously, and I think we all have seen that enormous pressure on our business models. And that's also why we create Mediahuis, to face those challenges. And what I'll try to explain in the rest of the slides is how we are tackling this. And again, sometimes that works out well. Sometimes, obviously, we also make mistakes, and we learn from that. But I'll try to go through the strategy and also focus on the subscriptions within that strategy. So how do we ensure to build a long-term sustainable business? It all starts with a compelling digital news experience. This is what it's all about. It starts with good content and good journalism. Not only that, you have to package that in a good product. A good product, whether it's a newspaper itself, but obviously over the last years, the apps, mobile websites, our podcast apps, and so on have become much more important. So it's a combination of really good content and the product, the digital product, which is really where it all starts. The second element, and this is important, is valuable relationships. We used to focus a lot in the past on relationships. When we had a visitor on our website, we were happy with having a visitor. That has changed over time, over the last years, and we're really focusing on those valuable relationships. Again, valuable is also important because we feel that we provide a lot of value, and we also feel that we can charge for that value. We feel that good journalism has to be paid for at a good price, and I'll come to the pricing and the work that we've done with MATHER and Matt's team on that. But that is really important. This is really key to us. And the third element, obviously, is advertising. But it's really important for us that the second one is much more important than the third one. I also have a background. I haven't spent my whole life in the media, and when I take a step back, and it's sometimes a bit weird. We're selling news media products. We're selling subscriptions, and it's a bit weird in the sense that we're charging for something, but the revenue we get from those subscriptions, don't cover the cost of our company. And we have to add advertising to make it sustainable, which is a bit weird. if you compare it, if you go buy a car, for example, and so you get a car and you pay the price, and then the car dealer says, and he said, well, what kind of ads do you want on your car? It's like Pepsi or Coke, or what do you want? I say, no, I just want a car, right? I want to pay for this car. It's worth my while paying for that car. And so what we are striving for, even though we also love advertising and the revenues, we really want to strive for our consumers paying the right and a good price for our journalism, and with that revenue that we're able to sustain the journalistic model. Okay, so what has that resulted in? What you see here is for one of our titles, NRC, a company we acquired in 2014. This is the evolution in the number of subscriptions. And what you see until 2015 is that we have a sharp drop. I think we've seen that in a lot of places. But that since then, we've been able to grow that up until 2020. And if you look at 2021, obviously that's also the effect of COVID that this has had. But if you look at how far we are in 2021 compared to 2013, we're quite happy with these numbers. This has been the work of a number of people. You might know Xavier van Leeuwen and Matthijs van den Peppel. They've also written 2 books about how we have done it. Very interesting. If you have some spare time, you should read them. And we've also worked very extensively on this with MATHER, because NRC and MATHER have been partners for a very, very long time. And it's also with the support of Matt's team that we've been able to build this. Now, looking back, how have we achieved this? And then I want to come to the media subscription engine. Basically, that engine to me has 6 ingredients, and I'll go quickly over all 6 of them. Starting with consumer centricity is very important. Getting the insights, getting the data. I think it's also what Pete explained quite well. Technology has become extremely important. The price is essential, and then the team. And the people within that team and the 8 people. So I'll go over all those 6 elements a bit more in detail. Consumer centricity, I think this is very important. Not too long ago, we were very focused on the product, and product is very important. And we thought that was the center of everything. And we also thought we knew the customer. We didn't really have a lot of data on the customer, but you just felt we do the customer. What we have been doing since a couple of years is really trying to put that consumer in the center. It's important because if you do that, it increases engagement, loyalty, happy customers, and so on. And what we also saw is that changing this also and working on this also has sort of created an animosity in the company for everybody. So really working around your customer, really focusing on that is making people feel very enthusiastic. It's important to have the top management support on that, but it's also important to make that tangible. For example, what we did, and this is just one example, what we did is that we made teams of 2 people out of different parts of the organization, and they went to visit customers of us physically. They went there and they sat in the kitchen, they had coffee, and they talked about the newspaper, about the digital media, what it meant for them, if they felt we were doing well, what we could improve. A real conversation of an hour or even more in some cases with that customer. And it gives a lot of information, but it also puts yourself close to that customer. It creates a sort of a bond and also an engagement. And it's really important to really put that consumer-driven mentality in your organization. Making it tangible also means that you have to translate it into projects, target, trainings, and so on. Roadshows, tangible results, but I think that's quite obvious. The second thing which is important, and this is a really important one, is insights. This slide shows the acquisition channels of Telegraaf, which is one of our biggest news media titles, and how this has evolved over the years. So you see that before 2018, a lot of the acquisition was done through field marketing. That's something that's done in Holland, where you try to sell a newspaper subscription on the street. It's quite typical in Holland. Telemarketing, email, direct mail, and those were the main channels. Obviously, there's been an incredible growth, and that really has to do obviously with the pay voltage and subscriptions in the acquisition that we do online. And so you see how the relation is between the online acquisition channels and all of the other ones. And this is really interesting in the sense, and this is not only digital subscriptions, it is subscriptions, even pure print, fixed subscriptions, for all kinds of subscriptions. And this is really interesting in the sense that if you look at that online channel, it is really a very exciting channel in the sense that you can measure things, you can orchestrate things. So let's say the way that you can work on that is much more extensive than on the other. Once we have that, what we have done is we created consumer journeys, and this is one of the representations that you have. Again, with the different elements, the awareness, registration, consideration, purchase, and so on. Also in the middle, you see a number of the things we measure. For example, when we try to retain people, we measure the consumer effort score, we measure the consumer satisfaction score, and so on and so on. NPS, obviously, something that we measure. I think what's at the bottom is quite important to make that division. Maybe also to refer to what Pete said, is like, the propensity to register. That's the first thing. You need a lot of volume of visitors, but it's really, really important to convert those unknown users to known users. And this is something which is hard work. It takes some time. We've been working on this for about seven or 8 years. So most of our titles, they're up to 60, 70, 80% of known users. And this is really important because with that data, you can start working, right? You can start working and trying to see what will trigger them into buying. Article recommendation, personalization. For example, we do personalization on newsletters, we do personalization on homepages, and so on. Intelligent paywalls, and that leads to purchase. And from there, you continue to work. Also, we've done a lot of work on the win back as well. It's not because a subscriber has sort of stopped his subscription that you can't win him or her back. That's really important to focus on, and then we've had very good results with our customer service into getting customers back. So once you have the insights, what do you do with them? I think one thing that we have learned is, and this is a case for us, it might not work in your case, but start with the simple things. So for example, what we saw is that the graph that you see is the black line is that the drop-off of trial subscriptions was very strong. And just after a couple of weeks, we were just left with less than 10% of our subscribers. So we stopped doing that. It didn't make any sense. So it's not all about complicated data. Some things are very simple, and you have to start with the simple things. And we started selling 2 and 3 year subscriptions. And now the average subscriptions that we sell are between 2 and 3 years with automatic renewals. And then you can go into more detailed and more complex measurements. We have systems we call article DNA, which really focus on the content. We have reader DNA focusing on obviously on the reader, trying to combine then work on churn models, on retention models, and so on. You can do that later once you have all the points, but you really need to start with the simple things. Technology, I won't go into this slide because we'll talk for a couple of hours on this one, but it's really important to have the good tech. What we have seen is that we used to build a lot. We've moved more to a buy strategy now because there's a lot of very good technology that you can see. There's a lot of very new technology as well in buying all those components and trying to stitch them together in a service-oriented architecture. This is really important, and this takes a lot of time, a lot of investment. As I said, we invest around 70 million euros a year in technology, which is quite substantial. The pricing is very important. Obviously, the volume is important, but the pricing is also very important. I remember a time when it was all about gut feeling, and we would have discussions on how you price things, and someone said, like, let's do 2%. So we said, no, let's do 3% because we did just 1 last year, and paper prices have gone up, so we have to cover for that. I think that's all past time. We've been working since a lot of years, as I mentioned, with Matt's team on market-based pricing techniques, where we try to maximize the customer lifetime value and minimizing the subscriber losses. At the right-hand side, you see an example of this, where we typically had increases of 2-3% every year, where in a number of cases we went up to 10 to 12%, not the 79 that was mentioned earlier, but 10% on a full subscription, without almost having no losses if you compare that to the control group. So that was really interesting. And we've learned not to be afraid anymore. Like the first time we wanted to do this, everybody was really scared that it wouldn't work. The data showed that it should work. So don't be afraid. Let the data work, let the data talk, and make decisions based on that, and not just your gut feel. And obviously, also, I think that's also something that Pete said and Tony said, is testing, right? You test things, you have control groups, and everything doesn't work for the same cohort of users. And then the last two items, and I'll try to go a bit quicker, is that this is how our organization used to look like. There were like silo teams with everybody having targets, and that hopefully then that would lead to sort of the group and global target. What we are working now with, and that is still in progress, is that we have self-managed teams, cross-functional teams, where people out of different environments work together with a single goal that is for the group, and that leads to the group goal. And this is really has given a lot of positive energy to the members in this team. It's quite tough. It's a whole journey. We're not there yet, but certainly where we have gone and where we've seen the successes, this has had a massive impact. And then last but not least is, and it's not always possible, I understand, but really try to hire A people, right? A players hire A players, and B players hire C players. This is really important. You need the right people, and you can't make any concessions when it comes to having the best people in the areas where you can make the difference. That means that you need to have people-oriented, but also result-oriented people, really eager to learn. They don't come with the knowledge, that's not possible, but if you're eager to learn, then you'll get there. And you really have, as a team, you have to be unanimous in when you're hiring someone, and also makes zero concessions when you're working with those employees, doing their annual reviews. We're quite strict. We really want to work with the best people, because they really make a difference for us. So I showed you the results that we had for NRC. These are a couple of the other titles that we have. The biggest title, Telegraph, popular title, where we've also seen since we came in and sort of adapted that knowledge that we have, those processes that we have, been able to grow the number of total paid relationships, because that's how we measure them today. And we've seen the same thing on the right-hand side in the Noord-Hollands Dagblad, which is a local regional title, exactly the same thing. By applying these learnings, these mechanisms, using technology, the insights, that we've been able to grow our subscriptions. So with that, I conclude. I think I went a bit over time. Sorry for that, Dustin, but I hope there's still some time for questions. Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much, Paul. And we do have a few questions. And one I wanted to start out with, the journey you guys have been on over the past 7-8 years, and obviously the results have been very impressive. Is there something from the Mediahuis subscription engine or otherwise that you'd like to reinforce as a place that you'd start if you were to acquire a new publisher, for example, or if someone is somewhere else along the path that you'd recommend starting, and something you'd like to drive home?
What we do, this is obviously we've been acquiring companies quite aggressively over the last couple of years. So we always come in, and then there's work to do. There's also a lot to learn. I must say, this idea of this engine and how it's composed, that was not Mediahuis's idea. That's something that we learned when we made an acquisition. We saw what was done at NRC, what you guys also did at NRC, and that got us going. So we learn a lot by doing these acquisitions, but really it's making analysis. Where do we are at this point in time? Right? Do we have the right people? People is very important. You need to bring in the right people. What we try to do is work with the local team in the company that we acquire, but also bring in the knowledge. That's important, right? see what data you have, and then work on that. See what you do makes sense. Pricing is also a very interesting one because what we see is everybody's typically quite conservative with pricing because it feel it's already very expensive and should we really increase the price, but it's never measured. So what we start with is an analysis and see where the critical points are, and try to work on.
Great. One of the things I've seen you guys do is the long-term offers. It's something unusual that I haven't seen too many other places. And you mentioned the full stop of trial subscriptions as well. Is that something that you guys feel is appropriate for all news publishers, or are there other factors to consider that people should keep in mind? I know you mentioned your average acquisition subscription was something over 2 years now, which would be really high, I think, compared to most people on the call here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's also to answer your first question, I wouldn't advise everybody to do it. It is what worked with, in this case, with NRC. It worked really well. So you have to measure. I mean, this is only because we started really measuring and said, well, this doesn't make any sense. I mean, we sell a subscription, and then after a couple of weeks, the consumer's gone. That does not make any sense. Huh? Whether it's in a newspaper company or whether it's another company, it doesn't make any sense. So we stop doing that. We see different results in other titles in other countries as well. So it differs per title, and per country. However, overall, we've substantially reduced those trials because at the end they did make a difference. What we have seen is people were really, and we didn't anticipate that, but people were really willing to go for longer term subscriptions. Obviously, there's a price incentive. Obviously, if they do that, they get a lower price, they get a discount, and we also make clear that that's the discount they get, and then after that they go to the regular price, and that has worked quite well. But it's also something we learned. We didn't know. It was first time we said, "Oh, this is a bit strange, right?" There's people taking 2-3 years. It was also quite weird for us. But we started trying it, and with a lot of titles, certainly with what we call the quality newspapers, that works quite well. But I think it's important. What's already been said before by Tony and Pete is that you have to measure, and there are substantial differences between titles, in our case, between countries as well. So it's all about the measuring and acting on what you measure.
Great. I know we're almost out of time, so perhaps just one last question. Can you elaborate on the changes in the hiring process specifically? I know you mentioned hiring A players hire A players, B players hire C players. Is there something that you guys have changed that you'd recommend as far as recruiting talent and the decisions around whether to hire someone, or anything else you can elaborate on?
Yeah, I think we've changed a lot when it comes to working with the teams and with every employee. I think what we've seen is that, as I said already, is that you need the number of people that can really make a difference. Certainly when it comes to skills, knowledge skills. If you have a very good person and you have a good person, or you have a bad person, the difference between a very good person and a good person, also in tech, is incredible. Right? I would rather have one really good, I would rather have, let's say, one A player than 3 B players. I wouldn't have C players because they even have a negative influence on. So the difference between, in a number of areas between A and B is huge. What we have changed is we've become more critical. And sometimes it's difficult because you don't have the A person, and then you need to decide not to hire and try to find another solution. That's sometimes what we do. But we're quite critical about people that we hire. As I said, for example, and that's not true in every, because we also work relatively independent, or the companies work relatively independent, but most companies, they're very strict, and there's a unanimous decision, right? In the past, we used to work on consensus, and somebody said, I'm not quite sure. And then we said, okay, well, but would you be against hiring? And said, oh, now we really want everybody in the team. We involve more people, but everybody needs to be unanimous. I mean, there needs to be an added value of bringing her or him into the team. So that's one thing I think that we've changed. And also at the yearly process, we're more critical. And if something doesn't work out, we start first of all, we try to improve training and so on. And if that doesn't work, then it's also better both for let's say both parties too.
Great. Well, thank you, Paul. That was a really great session. We're thrilled to have you. So thank you so much for your time.
Well, thanks for having me. Bye.